1, 0, all engine running. Liftoff, we have a liftoff, 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
40 feet down, 2.5. Picking up some dust. 30 feet, 2.5 down. Take shadow. 4 forward. 4 forward. Drift into the right a little. Down a half. Contact light. Okay, engine stop. Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot. Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now. I'm at the foot of the ladder. The 11-foot beds are only depressed in the surface about 1 or 2 inches. I'm going to step off the limb now. That's 1 small step for man, 1 giant leap for mankind. Tony, this is so great you can't believe it. I believe it, Charlie. It's raining, Johnny. Look at it go, would you, Charlie? You got all your steering, it's great. Oh, this is going to be some kind of different ride. Hippity hoppity, hippity hopping over hill and dale. Da 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 da. Hippity hopping along. 1 ignition. Right away, Houston. Vector good.
We're burning flight.
Roger,
Roger. Looks good, flight.
Positive shot flight.
Roger.
Descending. Stand by for splashdown. Recovery, America, stable water, the crew is gone.
Yeah, it's been 50 or more years since we've been to the moon. Isn't that concerning? Our technology has advanced so much, and why haven't we been to the moon? Could it be an economic factor? Are there bigger worries on Earth? Well, what if I told you that CSA, or commonly known as Canadian Space Agency, is working with NASA to put people on the moon? Yeah, you heard me, right? Luke up the biology guy. Luke up biology guy. Luke the biology guy. Biology school. Luke the biology guy. The CSA, Canadian Space Agency, is making this competition with non-profit organizations, a business or for-profit organizations, or any indigenous organization, university, college, or institute, all in Canada are eligible to participate. But Luca, you haven't told us why NASA is a part of this and what your competition is, you nincompoop. Well, this competition is none other than the Aqua Lunar Challenge, where these Canadian innovators are eligible to submit a design for their moon water purification solution. There are 3 phases into this. Phase 1 is the concept design, which applicants will be required to submit an online application which provides a clear view and description of how their solution meets the challenge's objectives. And at this stage, applicants are competing for $22,500 Canadian. The second phase is the proof of concept. In this second stage, applicants will begin to develop the components of their prototype based on the design they made in phase 1. So these remaining applicants will submit the video footage to demonstrate their system or components of their system, and will provide a final report that states how their technology meets the criteria list. This time, applicants are competing for $100,000. And the last one is Phase 3, the prototype scaling. So, in the final stage, the remaining finalists will be expected to integrate the components of their prototype at a minimum of TRL of 4+. TRL, also known as Technology Readiness Level, is a type of measurement system to assess the maturity level of a particular technology. So, finalists will be required to submit a final report that outlines how they meet the criteria as well as solution problem-solving plan for their system. At this stage, finalists at this stage are competing for the grand winner prize of $400,000. Now, the moment that you have all been waiting for. The winner of the Aqua Lunar Challenge is nobody, at least for right now. Yeah, sorry to disappoint you guys, but the winner will not be selected until spring of 2026. Good thing that's only next year, but for now, we'll have to keep waiting. NASA is collaborating with the Canadian Space Agency, aka CSA, to create the Artemis program, which is a program with 3 stages that will get humans to have a long-term presence on the moon. Crazy, right? Well, the Artemis program is inspired by the Apollo series back in the 60s and 70s. And there are 3 phases again to this Artemis mission. So, Artemis 1 is the unmanned test flight. So, the goal is to test the space launch system, rocket, the Orion spacecraft, and key systems for the crewed missions, which will be later on. So, the SLS rocket will leave from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida with no people inside and go directly to the moon and enters an orbit around the moon called the Lunar Flyby. Then its systems will operate to see its ability in deep space. Then it will come back to Earth and splash in the Pacific Ocean. And in this part of the test flight, they will also test the Orion heat shield. So Artemis 2 is the manned flight. It will begin with the SLS rocket to be readied for a crew with enough fuel, food, and other important stuff. Then the SLS rocket will be sent into a lunar flyby trajectory, orbit Earth once. Before its departure, for the crew to run tests and check on the systems of the rocket. Then it'll leave Earth's orbit and orbit around the moon as close to 100 meters of the moon's surface. And after that, the SLS rocket will safely return to Earth and splash in the Pacific Ocean. Now, Artemis 3. This is probably the most exciting part, where the goal is to land astronauts on the lunar surface, especially near the South Pole, because it's great for conducting many experiments and operations, also because the South Pole has been proven to have water from comets. And the water is there because the area is cold and traps the water. This process is called the cold trap, where ice from comets hit the moon in a crater that is very cold. And the cold freezes the water and other elemental ice, which explains why lunar water is contaminated. Continuing, the SLS will orbit the Earth once to test if the system is working or not for deep space exploration. Then it'll head to the moon and use a lunar lander to safely descend into the lunar surface. So, the astronauts will land near the South Pole because, again, it is great for conducting experiments and analyzing data, and it's just great. And it could, in that project, they could also even use possible use of Canada's newly innovation of the water decontaminator from the Aqua Lunar Challenge. So, after around 1 week at the moon, the crew will head back to the Earth, to Orion for their first trip back to Earth and land in the Pacific Ocean again. So, over time, the Artemis aims to build a long-lasting infrastructure on the moon that supports long-term human exploration. This includes for the Lunar Gateway, which is an orbiting space station that will serve as a staging point for missions on the lunar surface and beyond. One last point to note, it is important to note that CSA and NASA have been collaborating and benefiting from each other for a long time, but NASA has not specifically stated that they'd be using CSA's exact technology under the Aqua Lunar Challenge during the Artemis mission. Whoa there, Luca! Water on the moon? You're leaving us so much to ponder! Alright. Well, NASA and the CSA have conducted many experiments through orbiting satellites, probes, remote sensory, and spectroscopy to find out if the moon has water in its surface. It's important to note that they found hydroxyl, which is OH, so it's one oxygen atom and one hydrogen atom, and not water, which is H2O, so two hydrogen atoms and one oxygen atom. But hydroxyl is extremely similar to H2O and can be easily converted into water. So these lunar waters can be found in permanently shattered craters and traces of hydroxyl and actual water in some sunlit areas in the lunar surface. You know what time it is. Luca's Science Podcast featuring Mateus. Yeah.